Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it.
Greetings, I'm Emmett, and recently I've been on a little bit of a nostalgic. And recently I've been on a little bit of a nostalgic video game trip. Nothing wrong with that. I just got finished playing Portal, or Portal 2. Well, actually I played both of them, but Portal 2 is the noteworthy one because it's the one that I played a lot as a kid. Honestly, I probably played it a little too much, to the point where, going back to it years later, a lot of the test chambers are familiar to me. Although, now that I'm an adult and a writer, I can appreciate things like the dialogue. That game is really well written. Thus, today, I am going to make something Portal-y. Something from Portal. Specifically CHELL, the character that you never actually see. Well, that's not true. You do see her sometimes, but it's like a Bigfoot sighting. I'm also considering making a GLaDOS later on, but that would be a much more complicated build, and that's not what I'm in the mood for right now. How much work would I need to put into that? Like, would I really need to make it proportional to CHELL? And would I have to make an entire room just for her to hang from the ceiling? These are the questions of life. Will they be answered? Nobody knows. That's another question of life. Speaking of questions, it is CHELL. Right? That's what was always in my head. But now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm not sure if I've ever actually heard anyone else say it out loud. I mean, what else would it be? CHELL? CHELL? Is that a name? Oh well. To make these action figures, I always start with a pipe cleaner frame. I normally base the size on an actual action figure, but I've probably done this so many times that I could do it free-handed and still get the size about right. I've also been working to make my figures a little more natural looking, and one step in that process I've found is to make their limbs slightly longer. This obviously helps them not look as stumpy. I wrap up the sections of the body with tape to bulk it up, but I don't want to bulk it up too much. In the past, I've bulked the tape up to the point where it looks good, but on something this small, fabric adds a lot of body. So right now, I'm warming up the hot glue gun, and I'm gonna add a little bit of foam to help shape her head and torso mostly. But I'm actually gonna try something new. I want to try to use clay to shape her body a little more. I do kind of like my cylindrical head look. It kind of makes me think of Legos. Like, there is something charming about having a specific style. But, like I said, I am going for more realism these days, so I feel like using clay would be more to my benefit. I had been using foam clay, but I don't really want to wait for it to dry, and it only sticks to foam. So when it comes to like the arms, I'm probably going to cover it in some old modeling clay I have. Hopefully that'll help hide all the tape edges. So the modeling clay worked about as good as I was hoping it would. It stuck to the tape pretty well, but it did not stick to the foam. So I am going to need to use some foam clay after all. I'm just not going to wait for it to dry, because I'm trying to get this done in one day. It took a little while to shape the face. I do have a lot of trouble when it comes to like really fine details. If I can't work with these big clumsy fingers, then it gets a little tricky. And my hands aren't even that big. I employed a few tools to help squish it, and eventually got there. And then I moved on. Oh. This is the first female figure I've made on this channel. I don't actually know for sure what to do here. I mean, it's not like it's actual nudity.
Doesn't like tits.
I don't get that detailed with it. But I know that there are children who watch this channel. So that does give me a little pause. It actually took me a while to start making female action figures because as a little laddie growing up in a semi-sheltered Christian household, I was always worried about, oh no, what if someone catches me making boobies? But now that I'm an adult, I just see it as part of the process. Whenever I make like a big buff male character, I always give him muscles, so it's basically the same thing. Then again, I never actually told anyone that I made a Catwoman figure, because honestly, the best part of that is the cleavage, and I'm not sure how proud of that I should be. Anyway, I should probably stop talking about this, but one more thing. I used to stack up discs of foam, but that always looked a little off.
Just, yeah, a little chunky.
And so this was actually one of the first things that I used clay for, because it looks more natural. But moving on.
Boobies?
Okay, it's over. You can bring out the kids now. Wait. She's wearing a tank top, so I'm gonna have to paint her whole chest just to make sure I have my bases covered. Hopefully, if I cover the clay in enough Mod Podge, that will stop it from squishing, because paint usually stiffens things up. So I gave her skin tone and undergarments. Skin tone and undergarments kind of sounds like the second coming of a bare naked ladies type band. Yeah, I don't know if this was the best fabric to use, but it was probably the best I had. There was another fabric that maybe the color matched better, but it wasn't. It's a type of fabric that I didn't think would be easy to work with. But it's not like this layer will be seen that much. It'll be covered up by the other tank top. I guess I'll just get started working on the laptop. My original plan for the Aperture logo on the tank top, was to like cut out a stencil and paint over it. But now looking at it, like that'd be so small. There wouldn't be any way I could really cut that out. So instead, I'm going to draw the pattern of the shirt, and then I'm just going to use a marker, because that seems simplest. You know, I've completely forgotten where I was with the monologue. So allow me to summarize. I had a certain day to myself, and I was going to make it a dedicated filming day. I was going to work all day, try to do a one-day build, get it done while I had time, because I wasn't sure when the next time I was going to be able to film. And I kind of rushed some things, and made some mistakes. The main one is the clay. I knew that the modeling clay was always going to be soft. It wasn't going to harden over time. Because, I mean, if it was going to, it would have already hardened because of how old it is. I was just hoping that if I covered it with enough Mod Podge, that would keep its shape. And I think I was right about that. I just did not put on nearly enough Mod Podge. Along the way, it got squished, and that made some pretty ugly wrinkles and cracks in the paint. I was able to knead it out a little bit, but it was still kind of obvious. And then with the face, I completely forgot that the foam clay that I used usually shrinks up slightly as it dries. So because I painted it directly after I put it on, as it shrunk up, it crinkled all the paint and made it just, kind of not really look very good. And on top of that, pretty much everything that I tried to do with the clothes didn't really work. This was actually the first logo that I tried to draw. I thought that looked pretty good, but it was way too big. It like covered her entire chest and went down into her armpits. So I drew another one and went ahead and put that into the actual shirt. It wasn't until afterwards that I was looking at it and was like, that's a little messy. I probably could have done better, but it's too late now. Originally, I was planning on sewing up the shirt like an actual shirt and putting it on, but it got so stretched out as I was working it over her arms that it did not fit, so I had to cut it apart and glue it on anyway. And then my first couple of tries with the jumpsuit did not work. Either the pattern was off, or the size was wrong, or I didn't sew things on the right way. I worked pretty late into the night trying to figure all this out, and it just stopped being fun, which I think is a fairly important mental health note, because normally this is a pretty relaxing hobby that I can really throw myself into. But because I was stressing over deadlines that didn't really matter, it just caused me anxiety a little bit. And I decided that I needed to take a step back. So yeah, I gave myself a week and then came back to it with fresh eyes and a clear mind. And now I feel better about it because none of the mistakes were actually fatal. They were just frequent enough to leave me very frustrated. I was almost tempted to call it quits and scrap it, but I'm glad I didn't because it is turning out well now that I have been able to succeed a little bit. I covered the arms and face in several more layers of Mod Podge and repainted it, and that seems to be working. I'm sure if I really tried to squish it, it would still squish, but so far it seems like it's holding its shape better than it was, so I don't want to ruin it prematurely. And then the jumpsuit went pretty well. I was able to get the pattern right, I was able to fold it around her waist the way it should be. The one thing that's a little bit off, though, like I mentioned before, I was trying to go for a more like natural and realistic look with this, and part of that meant thinning down the limbs, and I kind of overcompensated, and her legs do look a little thin, mostly if you look at it from the side. And that's another trend that I tend to do. A lot of times I don't make things three-dimensional enough. Again, something I've noticed and am improving upon. I don't think it looks bad necessarily, because most people will probably be looking at it front on. But if it really starts to bug me, I could always just glue on extra padding to the back. I probably will do that. That way she won't look so two-dimensional. The boots were pretty straightforward, actually. I just wrapped it in foam. But the heels, I guess, the little jumpy bits, those are actual strips of metal that I snipped out and bent into shape. I cut a slit in the foam of the boot and kind of stuck it in there and glued it in with super glue. Hopefully that will stay. It seems to be staying pretty good now. I didn't know for sure how well things would stick to metal. I did scratch it up with sandpaper first. That usually helps. Now I'm feeling a lot better about it. I think it's coming out pretty well, and I'm ready to keep working. Before I put on the little hangy down bangs, I went ahead and painted on part of the face. Normally I do this as like the final last touch, but I wanted to do it before some of the hair got in the way. I also went over her hair with a black marker to darken it a little bit. Then I moved on to making the gun. I cut 3 sections out of a blue pipe cleaner, twisted them together to make the frontal little grabber arms. I burnt the grabber ends of the pipe cleaner, and then I stuck the fluffy blue end down into a section of a clear plastic straw. I smeared the pipe cleaner with a little white paint before I shoved it down in there, and that did smudge the plastic a little bit. My goal was to make it look a little more glowy, and I guess I did accomplish that at least. I used one of those little round bits off of a circuit board as the nozzle. I should probably learn what those things are called. I used to use them a lot when making like robotics and things. They're good little parts if you need a small cylinder. I built up the base of the gun with foam scraps and then used some more foam clay to shape the actual gun. I also glued on some wires where the wires be. And after painting everything appropriately and adding the pupils and the mouth, I'd say she's done. and I'm really glad that I stuck with it, because that looks pretty good. Got a little tricky there, but I guess confidence is key. Most of the time when I was stressing out about it, it was just because of my own brief mental issues. So yeah, now I have another portal person. And I'm glad that I was able to make the portal gun look good, because with this portal gun, I never really liked it. I always knew that it was kind of cheesy. I just went with it because I didn't know how else to fix it. But this version is much better.
C'est beau.